It's just after 8:30 here, and we're live from the studios of British Muslim TV here in Wakefield, West Yorkshire, with this week's live edition of Questions with me, your host, Mohammed Shafiq. We're broadcasting on Sky Channel 752 and across social media at British Muslim TV. Wherever you are joining us, a very warm welcome. Now, we want you to comment on the big stories we're covering tonight. You can call us now on 01924 231 083 or messages on the WhatsApp number, which is on the screen now. Now, if you're watching this on Facebook Live, a very warm welcome to you as well. Post your comments in the chat box and we'll read some of them on later on in the program. Tonight, first, we head to Minnesota in the United States, where we have an exclusive conversation with one of the world's most renowned Islamic female scholars, Sheikha Dr. Tamara Gray, about celebrating her life as a scholar and those that have inspired her work. Then we head to Newcastle upon Tyne to talk to Smajo Beso about the Bosnian massacre 30 years on and what life is like for those communities 30 years on, particularly for those that survived and rebuilt their lives here in the United Kingdom and around the world. And then we finish off in my hometown of Rochdale. Yes, we're back there again with a conversation with a boxer that made history in fighting for diabetic fighters to be given a license to fight and is now back in the ring later this month. Muhammad Ali joins us for that exclusive chat. So we want to hear from you tonight. You can call us on 01924 231 083 or messages on British Muslim TV across social media. Alternatively, as I said, you can give us a WhatsApp message. The number is on your screen. The questions we're considering tonight: which Islamic scholars in our history inspire you? How can we learn from the massacres in Bosnia to make sure that it doesn't ever happen again? And how important is boxing for young British Muslims? Please share your thoughts on 01924 231 083, messages on WhatsApp, post on social media, and as I keep promising, we'll read some of the comments on the program as we get going. Let's get started on our first. Let's get a start. Anyway, what word is it? Anyway, let's get started on the first story. Throughout Islamic history, Muslim scholars have made a unique contribution to the Ummah. From the first Hadith scholar, the mother of believers and beloved wife of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wasallam, Sayyidah Aisha salamun alayha, to the blessed daughter Sayyidah Fatima Zahra salamun alayha, to the blessed granddaughter Sayyidah Zainab salamun alayha, who confronted a tyrant Yazid in the aftermath of the Battle of Karbala. Women have been at the heart of the Islamic story and history. My next guest is a leading Islamic scholar in her own right. Dr. Tamara Gray spent 25 years in the education field. She's the founder of Rabata, an organization dedicated to promoting positive cultural change through creative educational experiences. Her story is an extraordinary example of excellence and service to the Ummah. From writing books to teaching, she is making that massive difference. I'm pleased to say Sheikha Dr. Tamara Gray is live on British Muslim TV from Minnesota in the United States. Honorable Sheikha, a very warm welcome to the program and thank you so much for honoring us with your presence tonight.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
First, tell our viewers about your journey into Islam. It was 37 years ago, I think.
Yes, it's January, so 37 years ago, I became a Muslim. I mean, the journey is a long story, so I will give you the Reader's Digest version. I'll squish it down to a couple of sentences. I was a practicing Christian, very much a practicing Christian, and I struggled when I entered college at 18 years old. I struggled with the ideas of the Trinity, etc. Studied, learned that I not only struggled with them, but I couldn't swallow the theological underpinnings of them. And then I began to search for a religion, and I eventually, after sort of refusing to learn about Islam, I decided to learn about it. Although this was pre-Google, pre-internet, so that learning process was really just buying a Quran in English, asking a Muslim student at my campus about it, and then praying and asking God for guidance. And I became Muslim there and then, really without a lot of understanding. A lot of other people become Muslim because they really learned about Islam. I became Muslim because I had a prayer that I really believed after the prayer that the Quran is indeed the word of God, and that meant for me that I'm a Muslim, that I have to be.
Now, you would think in the environment that we live in, where there's Islamophobia and anti-Muslim hatred, that people would be reluctant to come into Islam. How do you think people choose Islam in the modern context?
I think they choose Islam in the modern context in similar ways they've always chosen Islam. The heart craves to know God. The heart, it really does. And I think someone like me really has that understanding, where to live a life on this earth, not knowing exactly how God wants to be worshipped, is hard. There's a particular difficulty in that. And so when you come to Islam, you have this great blessing of knowing what God wants and how God wants to be worshipped, and the concept of La ilaha illallah, the concept of Tawheed. So I think that what happens is that in this time of Islamophobia, people become Muslim in spite of the social things, let's say, that might hold them back. But even if you look at the time of the Prophet, Allahumma salli wa sallim barak alayhi, there were those things that would have held people back. But nonetheless, people became Muslim. Why? Because that inner self really craves to know God, and Islam is the path of knowing God and how to worship God.
Now, what advice do you give to those people who are thinking about becoming a Muslim, who might be watching this, because we have lots of non-Muslims who watch our program? What's your advice to them?
The advice I usually give is, I have a couple of things. One is, make sure you have good friends. Make sure you have a good community of people who are understanding of you as your whole person. And that's that second piece. Remember that walking into Islam is walking with your whole self. Bring your whole self. Very often when one becomes a Muslim, we kind of get caught up in certain cultures that are fun. They're fun, and that's fun. It's nice to have experiences with cultures and things like that. But this is a road of our whole self. We don't want to fragment ourselves, is what I'm saying. So really know yourself, bring yourself forward into Islam. Be careful of, if once you've become a Muslim, be careful of a community that tells you, oh, you have to get married if you're not. If you're already married, make sure that you are having those conversations with the people around you about those spiritual changes, because that makes it easier for them to walk with you on this path.
And then let's switch that and talk about those people that might be thinking of leaving the faith, because that's obviously on the increase as well in some parts of the world. What would you say to them?
Again, I'm going to say it. I'm going to reverse this. I'm going to say that we have to be really careful not to let's say, I can't think of the word I want, but load on to human beings the carrying of the religion of God. Muslims are imperfect. We're 1 billion Muslims. And sometimes the experiences for people are hard and harsh, especially for women. I especially speak to you who are women, Muslim women. The experience of being a Muslim woman is not easy in our community. And that is not the fault of Islam. That is not the fault of Islam. It is the fault of Muslims, of society, of environments, of all sorts of other things. But it is not the fault of Islam. So I say to you, don't unload something beautiful because human beings have given it ugly pieces. Rather, learn how to peel away the ugly and get down to the reality, what is really beautiful and nourishing and enriching.
And then, because you didn't just become a Muslim, you became a scholar and a leader. What inspired you to take it to the next level? Because most people just be busy becoming a Muslim, but you wanted to do much more than that.
Truthfully, I think, I became a Muslim in 1985. We didn't have Google. We didn't have internet. We had books at the local bookstore, and we had Muslims. And somebody sent me a box, God bless her, sent me a box of books about Islam, and I could barely stomach them. I mean, one, I believe, in the pile, I could stomach for English language, or even for just sort of attitudes that were coming through in the language about women. And I really believed Islam was true because of my spiritual experience. And so but I was very much an academic type. I guess I still am. And so I needed to connect my heart and my mind together. And so the only way I knew how to do that was to to further myself on the path of knowledge, because this level 1 group of books didn't feel to me like anything that made any sense about in the way that I understood God, and even my limited understanding of Islam in those early days. They just didn't make sense. There was a lot of misogyny and other stuff in those books. So that experience made me feel like I need to learn more. And then from there also, I think that grew into, I want to open up this door for other women who have been exposed to books and people and rhetoric that felt exclusionary to them, and just have us all really understand and see Islam for what it was at the time of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and therefore what it is, which is a place for men and women to grow spiritually, to contribute to the community, to become community stewards, and to grow, to be to fulfill our purpose on this earth.
And when you look at that history, Islamic history, you look at the unique scholars, female scholars who propagated the deen. Did you experience that in the American Muslim community when you first came into Islam? Were you welcomed as a female scholar?
When I first became Muslim?
Yeah, on your journey. Yeah, on your journey.
Well, after I came back from Syria, I'd been in Syria for 20 years. When I came back, I have received from many people a wonderful reception of support. I'll put it that way.
Read what you can into that. My special guest is the Honourable Sheikh Dr. Tamara Gray. She's joining us live from the United States, the state of Minnesota, which she was telling me before we came on air. It's -8 or 9, you were saying, were you?
-14.
Wow, -14. So it's 9 degrees here in the UK. So it feels like summer in comparison to what the temperature's like in the United States. Sheikh is going to stay with us. We're going to take a very quick break. And when we come back, we'll continue the important conversation, just reflecting on that Islamic history and those personalities that have brought us Islam today. I'm focusing very much on the women scholars. We're broadcasting live from the studios of British Muslim TV. Wherever you are, we hope you're well and you are benefiting from this program. As I said, we'll take a break. Sheikh Dr. Tamara Gray is going to stay with us. Join us on the other side of these very important messages. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Assalamu alaikum, welcome back to Questions with me, Mohammed Shafiq, exclusively here on British Muslim TV. We're live from our studios here in Wakefield in West Yorkshire. We're taking your calls now on 01924231083. You can get in touch with us on social media, British Muslim TV. We have an exclusive conversation with the Islamic scholar from Minnesota in the United States, who is my special guest, joining us live from the States. Now, Dr. Tamara Gray, before the break, you were telling us about becoming an Islamic scholar, and I referred in the opening to Sayyidah Aisha or Sayyidah Fatima salamun alayha in the opening. Which female Islamic scholars in our history have inspired you on your journey?
Well, I think I have to answer that always starting with Aisha radiallahu anha, because she's unique in that I would say she's the beginning of female scholarship. And then after her, Ammarat bint Abdurrahman, I'm inspired by her because she was a very important jurist and one of her students. I'm also very much inspired by Nana Asma'u. Probably if I'm going to speak about a historical woman, Nana Asma'u is the one that I'm most inspired by, because she was a great scholar, an educator. She was very conscious of the importance of this kind of learning for community in order to preserve the next generations and also to care for them. She was a brilliant and creative educator who was willing to do things that no one had done before in order to grow the knowledge of deen amongst women in West Africa. I am also inspired by Aisha Ba'yuniya, and she is we're blessed because she's one of the very, very few women that we still have that her writings have come to us. So we do have some of her writings. And she was a very spiritual woman as well as a teacher. And I'm inspired by her because of her writings. Nana Asma'u's writings are mostly in poetry, and they're very beautiful. Aisha Ba'yuniya's also has poetry, but her prose really inspires me because it it redefines and talks about issues of aqidah in very spiritual and beautiful ways.
Yeah, because sometimes there's an Orientalist viewpoint that somehow there's a clash between the religion of Islam and Muslim women who can't be leaders, scholars, or active in public life. As an historian yourself, what would you say in response to that viewpoint?
Well, I like how you asked the question by saying it's an Orientalist viewpoint. I think you're being a little bit, you're granting innocence to Muslims where it doesn't always exist. I would say that Orientalists definitely have in the past brought forth this idea that women can't be scholars. I've also heard it from Muslims. And it is absolutely not founded in our origins. It's amazing because if you look at our origins, the canon, if you will, to use that term, of our very knowledge base, our foundational knowledge, is rooted in the words and teachings of women. Not only women, yes, there are men too, of course, but the fact that it's rooted in the teachings and words and community stewardship of women tells us, especially as Muslims, we know that we base our thinking on what we call those early generations of Salaf, that we really rely on those generations to teach us sort of how things are supposed to be. And we know that there were many women, not just women in general, but women who were intentional. Aisha radiallahu anha brought into her home Amr bint Abdurrahman, though they were not related, in order to teach her and to make sure that she would become a scholar for the next generation. Nafisa al-Tahira was one of the teachers of Imam Shafiq. I mean, this is something that we have to acknowledge, that our scholar, and you in the UK, I'm actually sitting in front of a very important collection of books. You can see it on my, I don't know, that side here, over there. Volumes of 43 volumes of women scholars that were collected and written about by Sheikh Akram Nadwi, who you have in the UK, mashallah.
Yeah. Now, let's talk a bit about your organization. You set up an organization called Rabatha. What's the aims in regards to this organization?
Well, our aim is, we say our mission statement is to promote positive cultural change through creative educational experiences. And our vision, like the vision that I have in my head, is a rising tide of Muslim women around the world. Tides are gentle, right? They're gentle. But a rising tide of Muslim women who are scholars, who are teachers, who are community stewards, who can truly bring back the understanding of this religion and the ability to live this religion, because this will change our cultures in beautiful, positive ways within Islam, the Muslim community, and without. We are also responsible to bring our teachings in action-oriented ways. Like, we should be the ones that are caring for the environment the most. We should be the ones taking care of the poor. We should be the ones with the most beautiful behavior, pushing back on all that is ugly. But that's not where we are right now. So my vision really is that women, through learning about our religion, through having support channels, through reconnecting to our spirituality and our historical footprint, that we will become this rising tide and really change communities going forward into a much more positive experience for Muslims, especially Muslim women and our young people. And
we've just seen that Dr. Tamara Gray is just frozen there. What a great conversation we're having. Dr. Tamara Gray, who is joining us from the state of Minnesota, where it's minus 14 degrees, talking very much about Islamic scholars. And that's what we want to do. Female Islamic scholars in our history, who celebrating them. And we want to hear from you tonight. Who inspires you from the female Islamic scholars that Dr. Tamara Gray was talking about? Our number is on your screen now, 01924231083. We'll really love to have a conversation with you. If you've got a question for Dr. Tamara Gray, we'll also be putting them questions to them. But in a sense, that real first scholar which the Honourable Sheikha talked about, the Honourable Scholar talked about, was Sayyidah Aisha, Salamun alayha, Aisha to Siddiqa, Salamun alayha. She was the beloved wife of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, one of his most beloved wives. And she was so blessed to learn and to be nurtured and to gather so much information on hadith from Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, because she lived with Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And she was a giant of a hadith scholar. I don't think there is anybody of her stature in our Islamic history. And if you look at her time, that once the Prophet ﷺ passed away from this world, many Sahabi, many scholars would come together and learn about hadith from Sayyidah Aisha Siddiqa Salamun alayha. And that's the greatness of Islamic history. And we sometimes today forget that. Our women are marginalized, if I may say so, to small rooms at the top of a mosque or in the cellar. And we struggle to give a voice to our Muslim women. Just ask you to reflect on that history. We're still trying to connect to Sheikha Dr. Tamara Gray. Hopefully we'll reconnect with her very, very shortly. Oh, she's back. You are back. Yes.
Yes, I'm back.
Yes, the joys of modern technology. We got so excited that your connection was so great, and then something happens. But
places I should be okay now.
Yeah. So we were talking about Rabta, and we're talking about. I mean, in Urdu, for example, Rabta means connection. What does it mean in Arabic?
It means to bring together. Yeah, it means connection.
Yeah.
Yes, and we named it Rabata because my original idea was I wanted all the projects to have names that were related to Rabata. So like our academic program is called Ribat. And then I wanted our publishing company to be called Rabita. And then I wanted our curriculum program to be called something else. But then I was told that people who don't speak Arabic will find that very confusing. So we ended up with other names like Leadership and Legacy for our curriculum program and Daybreak for our publishing press. But nonetheless, I'm very happy with the name. I like the idea of bringing people together. I want to bring Muslim women together. I want to bring Muslims together. I'd like to bring just the whole world together in beautiful ways.
Yeah. Which is kind of consistent with the values of Islam, which is that we're all one ummah. And you've plans to set up a chapter here in the UK as well.
Yes, we're working on it. We are working on it. We're close to creating it as an official chapter. We have teachers there and students and a lot of wonderful, wonderful Rabata women, but we're not yet official. So we used to run youth retreats in the UK, in fact, before COVID. So we're hoping to, small ones, but we're hoping that soon enough we'll be able to start those again.
We've probably got about 3 minutes left, and I wanted to talk to you very briefly about Joy Jott's Exercise for a Happy Heart. It's in its second print edition. It's a bestseller on Amazon, and there are other platforms you can buy that book. Tell us a bit about this book. What's the story behind it?
I wrote this book the first year I came back to the United States, and I was in actually terrible grief. I was really grieving the life that I had left behind. I had no intention of leaving Damascus and coming to the United States. I wanted to stay there. But so I was writing this book, and it was really because I believe that even in grief we find joy in God. And so it ended. I used to write a piece a week, so like an essay a week throughout the first year that I was here. And then later I wrote a second edition. So the one that is available now is Joy Jott's second edition, which I changed some of them and added some new ones and this and that. But really it's 52 essays that are meant to teach us how they're exercises for the heart to make it a happy heart, even though with the admittance and the reality of the world. It's not sort of a Pollyanna approach. It's the reality that the world is hard, but we can still find and must find joy in our life here.
Well, I'm absolutely fascinated by our conversation. I'm just kind of sad that we've run out of time. I hope you can come back at a future time, inshallah. And we can continue our conversation. Thank you so much for honoring us with your presence.
Sure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. That was Sheikha Dr. Tamara Gray joining us live from Minnesota in the United States. A very powerful discussion, and apologies for the technical issues there. We would have liked to have had that conversation. I'm sure we can bring her back, and she's happy to do that. Thank you so much. She's an extraordinary human being. extraordinary scholar of Islam who is doing so much good work in the United States and around the world. And we look forward, as I said, here on British Muslim TV to welcoming him back. Now, after the break, we're going to head to Newcastle upon Tyne. Yes, Geordieland. Beautiful part of the United Kingdom. Very hospitable, very kind, happy people. We'll be talking to Smajo Beso about the Bosnian massacre 30 years on from the Bosnian War. Join us on the other side of these very important messages. Don't go anywhere. Join us shortly. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Okay, so we are back. Apologies for that. Welcome back to Questions with me, Mohammed Shafiq. It's the joys of live TV, exclusively here on British Muslim TV. We're taking your calls now on 01924 231 083. Get in touch with us on our social media handle, British Muslim TV. Let's move on to our next story. 30 years ago this year, Muslim Bosniaks were the majority of the population in the country of Bosnia as the Yugoslavia breakup began. Instead of hope for their freedom, the population saw death, destruction and concentration camps. The war lasted over 3 years, but by the end, over 200,000 were killed, hundreds of thousands displaced. Who can forget the Srebrenica massacre, where Bosniak Muslim men and young boys were rounded up and killed while the United Nations troops stood by and watched helplessly? My next guest is Smajo Beso. He's a survivor of that war. At a young age, he was able to flee to the United Kingdom and settle with his family in the Newcastle upon Tyne. He works at Newcastle University. He's born and grew up in the northeast, so he's proud to call himself a Geordie. I love Geordies. I'm pleased Smajo Beso is joining us live from the city of Newcastle upon Tyne here on British Muslim TV. Smajo, warm welcome to the programme.
Thank you so much, Shafiq. Thank you for having me and giving me the opportunity to speak about Bosnia.
I just think it's really important to remember so that we never forget for future generations. Tell us a bit about your childhood before the war, growing up in Bosnia.
Well, I think just before I get into that, I think just one thing that you said, you described it as the Srebrenica massacre. It was a massacre, but that massacre actually constituted and was internationally recognized as genocide, and there have been several international rulings that actually said what happened in Srebrenica in July of 1995 was genocide, and there are other international rulings that actually state that the genocide in Bosnia started as early as 1992, and Srebrenica and what happened in Srebrenica was just a culmination of those atrocities across the country. In terms of my own experience, well, yes, now I'm up in Newcastle. But my family came here in July of 1994. And actually, more specifically, I came here with my mom, my brother and sister, as part of a UK government program called the Bosnia Project, which only recently I've been trying to find out more about. But we actually came because my father was taken out of a Croatian concentration camp in January of that year. And as part of that agreement, we were brought here and we joined him, as I said, 7 months after that. In terms of life in Bosnia, and when I share my experience of Bosnia, and Shafiq, you've heard me speak, and we were joking around earlier that you'll hear me next week as well. I very much talk about a child's experience of war, because I was only 9 when I came here, and when the war started, I was about 6, 7. And life in Bosnia, from a child's perspective, was absolutely incredible. My parents had just built and designed their own home. We lived in southern Bosnia in a little town called Stolac, and life was incredible. And Bosnia was a modern European country. We had everything that we have here. I think it's so easy to think about wars and conflict and genocides when they happen, that they happen in these faraway places. But Bosnia is less than 3-hour flight away from Newcastle. And Bosnia actually also hosted the Winter Olympics in 1984. And I'm not sure, Shafiq, if you remember Torval and Dean becoming the highest scoring skaters of all time. So Bosnia is close to us here. But for us, as I said, childhood was incredible. My family was Muslim. In my family, we had Christians as well, distant family. And I'd say a lot of families were diverse and sort of mixed, and mine. And for us kids, you know, I'm not sure we were really aware of those differences because we're too busy playing, we're too busy being children.
Yeah.
And Eid was obviously a big part of my family, but Christmas and Easter, we would always celebrate with friends as well. And equally, they would celebrate Eid with us. So childhood for me was absolutely incredible. And Bosnia and the societies and communities that we had in Bosnia were absolutely incredible.
I just wanted to share something. So 1993, 1994, I was probably 15 or 16. And I remember in my local mosque, the doors being opened up. There was a small group of Bosnian people who come over, obviously fleeing the violence. They were welcome. They were given food and support, moral support and money. British people opened their doors and hearts. It was a positive welcome.
I always try and separate the position of the UK government at the time and the British people. The British people were absolutely incredible. If anyone, and we haven't got time to go into that, if anyone wants to look at the stance of the British government at the time, or maybe people like John Major and Douglas Hurd, that's a completely different debate. But if we look at what the British people did, yes, there was British Muslims who helped, sent aid to Bosnia, brought people over here, but British people in general were so incredibly welcoming and open about us fleeing war. So some of the first people that actually arrived in the northeast of England were people that were brought here by food and humanitarian convoys that were sent to Bosnia by local people from the northeast, and then they brought families back. I've got letters from Jim Cousins, who was the MP of Newcastle at the time, from about March, April of 1994, where he describes me, my parents, my brother and sister as his constituents. That's March, April of 1994. We were still living under siege in Mostar. We were starving. I didn't even know where Newcastle was. And there was someone up here describing me as his constituent. We had incredible teachers and people helping us when we came here. Next to our refugee centre in Newcastle, we had lived an elderly couple called Christina and John, and they opened their home for us. They held parties for us kids. People in the northeast were absolutely incredible in helping us settle. We had amazing teachers that help us learn English. We started school without able to speak a word of English. It was incredibly difficult. But if it wasn't for the amazing people of the Northeast, we wouldn't be here today. And I always use the Bosnian community as an example of what can be achieved when we support people and refugees fleeing conflict and other disasters in the right way.
So you talked about your childhood. You talked about how life was cohesive and, you shared different religions and people coming together. What caused the bloodshed and hatred then for the Bosniak communities?
I guess in a similar way to when we talk about the Holocaust, we don't talk about, the Holocaust didn't start with the gas chambers. In the same way, what happened in Bosnia in the 90s, it didn't start with concentration camps. More than 100,000 people died in Bosnia. More than 60,000 young girls and women were raped. There are more than 20,000 registered rape victims in Bosnia today. Those are female rape victims. There are more than 2,000 registered male rape victims, and that's something that we don't speak about at all, and there's not enough research being done on this subject. There were more than 2 million displaced people or people that became refugees. There are something like 1 million Bosnians living abroad like me now. So to understand what happened in the 90s, you have to go back a lot further than that. Now, I'm an architectural historian, and one of the things that I focus on is fascism and nationalism. And I think to really try and understand what happened in the 90s, you have to go back to early 20th century sort of nation state formations where the idea of a greater Serbia and a greater Croatia were really born. But again, we haven't got time to go into that. If you look at more recent history, when Tito died in the 1980s, it was May of 1980, nationalist parties started coming to power across the former Yugoslavia, and Bosnia was one of the constituent republics. And I think it was in 1986, a Serbian politician called Slobodan Milosevic came to power, and he was the one that really utilized this nationalist formula, and he started dividing people and grouping people. By 1989, he held a march to mark the Battle of Kosovo. It was a 600th year anniversary for the Battle of Kosovo from 1389. when Mladic and the Bosnian Serb soldiers entered Srebrenica in July of 1995, Mladic referenced the same Battle of Kosovo, and he said time had come for us to take revenge against the Turks. Muslims, for them, were Turks. So nationalist kind of agendas, fascist ideologies, kind of hatred, all these things entered the everyday discourse. And then, you know, by the early 90s, it became completely normal and acceptable to equate Bosnian Muslims to disease and vermin. And there came a point where the idea of killing another human being, it not only became a, you know, something that was morally acceptable, it became a moral imperative, because when you dehumanize people, Muslims were dehumanized to such an extent that it became completely normal to kill and rape and then go back to your own home at the end of the day and be happy with, you know, what these soldiers with their day's work. But it became completely normal to do this, because what are you doing when you're ridding society of disease and illness? You're doing society a service. So these things kind of didn't happen overnight. This was like calculated, this was systematic, this was planned, and this was many years in the making. And worryingly, we see the same ideology in Bosnia, in the Balkans, still around more than nearly 30 years later.
Now, Bosnian Muslims were deliberately targeted, which the United Nations has described as ethnic cleansing. How did you even make it out alive?
So again, the ethnic cleansing is usually used as a euphemism for genocide. So there are several international rulings that state that this was actually genocide. But again, it was actually a term that the Serbs coined, or the Serb fascist extremists coined, to describe what they were doing in the in parts of Bosnia when they were ethnically cleansing populations. My family, so we were ethnically cleansed from Stolac about a year into the war. Initially, it was the Serbs that surrounded Stolac. And after the Serbs were kind of driven out of Stolac, it was the Bosnians and the Croatians fighting side by side against the Serbs. A year later, the Croatians started rounding up Bosnian Muslim men, and my dad and all my uncles and cousins were rounded up into concentration camps. And then women and children, as part of that campaign, were ethnically cleansed to Bosnian government-controlled territory, and we settled and we lived in Mostar under siege for over a year. And then when my dad was released from prison camp to the Croatian government, it was very important that these men that were released, that they didn't go back to Bosnia because they could become soldiers. So the UK was part of this agreement with Croatia to take these men to other parts of the world. And my dad was actually brought here to the UK, and he had very little say to that. And then as part of that agreement, we were brought out by the British Red Cross and brought to Newcastle in July of 1995.
Well, perfect timing. We've got about 30 seconds before our break. Smajo is going to stay with us. We're going to continue the conversation after the break, and we'll talk a bit about the impact this had on his family and community and the nation of Bosnia, and really harrowing experience, and so important to listen to it so it never happens again. Join us on the other side of these very important messages. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Assalamu alaikum, welcome back to Questions with me, Mohammed Shafiq. We're having an exclusive conversation and reflection about the Bosnian genocide that was committed 30 years ago. My special guest, Smajo Beso, is still with us from Newcastle upon Tyne. Smajo, you know, we've just commemorated Holocaust Memorial Day last week, and, you know, we said the Nazi crimes that the crimes that the Nazis committed, and we all said never again, collectively, Europe, that it would never happen again. And it was shameful that it did happen again, and it happened in Bosnia.
Yes, I mean, sometimes I have issues with certain commemorative events because we hear speeches, we hear passionate speeches, and we say never again. But what does that actually mean? I feel like there's a term missing after never again. It's like never again, but then what? There's something needs to be added, I think, because for me, I think what's missing personally is action. We can talk about and we can remember, but unless we take meaningful action to prevent these things from happening again, then it's actually pointless. And for me, like, peace isn't just the absence of war. Peace is the actions taken to prevent war. And again, Bosnia, what happened in Bosnia really happened in our lifetime. It didn't happen long after the Holocaust. It happened just 50 years after the Holocaust. It's incredibly well documented. It was incredibly well documented. And Bosnia was placed under international sanctions for several years, which meant we were unable to get weapons to defend ourselves, which meant we were unable to, because we were in such a difficult position to get food, to get medicine. And so many people died needlessly, really, because of that, of the actions taken by the international community. So yes, I took part in so many incredible Holocaust Memorial Day events across the UK in the last couple of weeks, and I had first accounts from Holocaust survivors. But the scary thing is, like, the similarities between what happened in Bosnia and what happened in Europe in the 30s and 90s is frightening. And sometimes it's so easy to forget that when we look at things, when we look at black and white images from history books, and we think, what happened back then can't happen now, or what happened in Bosnia happened in some faraway place. But for me here, the step to safeguarding the incredible society that we have here in the UK is that acceptance. What happened in Bosnia can happen anywhere else, because I can guarantee you that most people in Bosnia leading up to the war thought, actually, it can't happen to us. And I remember back to, it must have been 1991 or 1992, when things were kind of starting to heat up. And again, as a child, I wasn't aware of all the kind of tensions in the background. And I remember one day we had just moved into our new home. And as I said, we had been living in our new home for 6 months before the war started. And I ran into the house, and my mom was sitting in front of the TV and she was crying. And she quickly tried to hide her tears. I ran up to her, because you can just sense the emotions on your parents' face. They're upset. They don't need to tell you anything. They don't need to explain anything. And I was asking her what was wrong. I was six years old at the time. And she said it was nothing. And she hugged me and she kissed me and she said, go outside and play. And I did. And it was only years later, when we started talking about the war and I've started recording my parents to try and capture their story, I realized she was watching TV and she was watching news reports of war spreading across parts of Croatia, parts of northern Bosnia. And she knew sooner or later they would come to us. And she was completely helpless. There was nothing she could do to help us. And my parents actually, maybe 6 months before this, had an opportunity to go to France, to work in France. But they thought, why leave? They were happy, they had a home, because again, no one thinks really this can ever happen to them.
And you briefly talked about John Major, who was the Prime Minister here in the UK. Douglas Hurd was the Foreign Secretary. Bill Clinton was the President of the United States. What did you make of the political inaction of governments around the world to stop this ethnic cleansing and massacres?
See, for me, I've heard a lot of people say the political inaction, but it wasn't inaction really, because Bosnia was placed under international sanctions. It meant that Bosnian Croats and Bosnian Serbs could openly get weapons from elsewhere. You had the Serbs being supported openly by Greece, by Russia, and other parts of Europe. You had the Croatians supported by Germany, by France, and other parts of Europe again, and where you had the Bosnian Muslims really stuck in the middle. And these sanctions were completely unfair, because it completely disadvantaged the Bosnian government, which was an internationally recognized independent state at the time, from defending itself. So I think the international community used an excuse that really no one knew what was happening. People were talking about ancient hatreds, that this was a place where people were hating each other for centuries and so on. And I think there was a lot of Islamophobia around then as well, where this kind of discrimination against Muslims, well, if Muslims are involved, they have to be the bad side and so on. These things I'm simplifying somewhat, but I think over time, when the international community could no longer hide what was happening in Bosnia, that the only side that didn't have official policies of ethnic cleansing and mass murder and rape was the Muslim side. The only mosques and churches and synagogues that survived were actually the ones that were situated in the Muslim-controlled territory. And it was actually British journalists like Alan Little, Edward Liami, and so on, that did so much incredible work to expose camps that had been set up by Bosnian Croats and the Bosnian Serbs to raise awareness of what was happening actually in Srebrenica leading up to the genocide and other parts of the country. So I think the world and the international community knew what was happening. I think Bosnians blindly believed that the international community would act, but it acted obviously in the wrong way, and it led to everything that it led to in the early 90s.
Have you been back to Bosnia?
I go back to Bosnia every single year. I'm going back actually in a couple of weeks. My work here at the university is centered around Bosnia. The work that I do here, sharing my story and educating about the Bosnian Genocide, I do that. Recently, I've set up an educational trust, Bosnian Genocide Educational Trust. I do study trips. So in 2018, we did our first study trip to Bosnia. I worked here with Newcastle City Council, so we passed a motion recognizing the genocide in Bosnia. And as part of that, we did a study trip to Bosnia. Bosnia is an incredibly beautiful country. If you ever get the opportunity to go,
I love to go. Yeah, it's one of those things I've always wanted to do. So I hope our friendship will allow me to do that trip.
Yeah, we should definitely go. It's a beautiful country. There's so much to see. So we should definitely organize that.
Definitely. Now we're beginning to see a similar level of hatred and bigotry by Bosnian Serbs who want to cede control in 2022. How scared are you that history will repeat itself of what happened to your country 30 years ago?
I think what we are seeing in Bosnia now is nothing new. This isn't something that's been happening over the last few weeks. This has been happening regularly for the last 30 years. You had some high-ranking officials that have been sentenced, but it's taken 20, 25 years to convict people like Mladic and Karadzic. And another interesting fact, Karadzic is actually serving his sentence for genocide here in the UK. So I think the things that we are seeing in the last few weeks that are just completely ignored by the sort of Western or European media is nothing new. The same people, the foot soldiers that committed those atrocities are still living in the same communities that they once terrorized. When I go back to Bosnia over the summer, it's like walking around a crime scene. You see the places where members of your family were killed, where you were held. You see the perpetrators of war crimes. Again, for me, it's easier because I've got that detachment. I'm living in the UK. But for my family and other Bosnians that are living there, I always say there's so much that we can learn from them. You know, people that have lost everyone and everything, people that have lost 50, 60 family members, mothers that have lost their sons, their husbands, their brothers, everyone. And when you hear them speak, and share their stories without an ounce of hatred and anger, I think that's incredible, because they don't want what happened to them happening to anyone else. But in Bosnia, or in parts of Bosnia where you have a Bosnian Serb or a Bosnian Croat majority, as I said, war criminals are openly celebrated. You have fascist marches, you have murals for war criminals. The Bosnian Serbs actually celebrate 9th of January, which is their public holiday, which was also the date when they proclaimed their parastate during the war, Republika Srpska, which was also the start of the Bosnian Genocide. Now this year, so just a couple of weeks ago, there were several French MEPs in attendance, there were Russian politicians, there were Serbian politicians. There were also politicians, I think, from China as well. So what's happening in Bosnia? It's nothing new, but it feels like because of the sort of geopolitical factors, everything that's happening in Ukraine, with Russia and so on, and in China, that the Bosnian Serbs feel like this is a perfect opportunity to kind of test these grounds to see whether they can basically do and achieve what they set out in the early 90s. Now,
a final question, sir, to you. Why is it so important for for you to do the work that you do, and for people watching this never to forget what happened in Bosnia?
The work that I do, it's incredibly difficult. It's incredibly draining. Just in January, I did more than 30 events, and it can be triggering because you're talking about some of your most personal and traumatic experiences in front of sometimes hundreds or thousands of people. But there is so much that we can learn from Bosnia and what happened there. Like, my work is about humanizing and personalizing history. Sometimes we can be so detached when we look at statistics and figures, we forget that there's a human being, that there's a human experience behind it. And for me, there's no better way of teaching about history, about teaching about what happened during the Holocaust and Bosnia and Rwanda and so on, than actually listening to survivor stories and listening to people share their own personal stories. So for me, as I said, there's so much that we can learn from Bosnia. And the best way to do this is to do the work that I'm doing, going into schools, colleges, universities, share my story across the country. And as I said, there's so much that we can actually learn from Bosnian Muslims who don't want what happened to them to happen to anyone else.
Well, thank you so much. Sadly, we've reached the end of our time together, Smajo Beso, and I want to thank you personally from myself and the whole team here at British Muslim TV for giving us the opportunity to hear your testimony and your story, and we wish you well. Look forward to welcoming you back, and maybe we can go to Bosnia together, inshallah.
Inshallah, we definitely should.
Thank you so much. Smajo Beso, Bosnian war survivor, joining us live from Newcastle upon Tyne, where he describes himself as a proud Geordie. Now, after the break, we're going to head to Rochdale to talk with the boxer, Muhammad Ali. Not that one, his name probably in tribute to the Muhammad Ali, but he was suffering from type 1 diabetes. We'll have an exclusive conversation with him. Join us on the other side of these very important messages. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi. Assalamu alaikum, welcome back to Questions with me, Mohammed Shafiq. Let's move on to our final guest and story. Boxing is a sport which is popular amongst many in the British Muslim community. Imagine having a dream as a child to be a boxer, then told because you suffer from type 1 diabetes, you cannot get a license to fight. Now, most people would have walked away, but not my next guest. He decided to take the authorities on, and he defeated them after a long campaign to get a fighting license. Muhammad Ali is a boxer from my hometown of Rochdale. His story has inspired so many people around the world and helped break down barriers for diabetic boxers. He's due to get back in the ring for the first time in 2 years. Yes, that's how long it's been for COVID. And he's fighting in Bolton on the 18th of February. Pleased to say Muhammad Ali is joining us live from Rochdale. Muhammad Ali, assalamu alaikum and a warm welcome to the program. Great to have this conversation.
Welcome, Aslam, Brother Shafiq. Thank you very much for having me on your great show.
Thank you so much. First of all, we know that your dad's a big boxing fan. Is that why you were named after Muhammad Ali?
No, I've got no family history of, boxing. It was just a name given.
Yeah, well, obviously, religious significance of the name as well. Now, when did you hear that you couldn't get a license because you suffer from diabetes?
Back in 2015, when I first applied for my British boxing license, I was just given no. Just a straight up answer as no, you can't have a license. I was fit, healthy. I was given zero explanation as to why I wasn't given my license. Like, for example, I suffer from a condition. I don't call it an illness. I call it a condition, and a controllable condition, diabetes. And I'm fit, I'm healthy, and I was given no reason except that you are diabetic. So I found that as being discrimination.
Yeah, discrimination. And in a sense, most people would have walked away, but you didn't walk away. How did you feel the need to launch a campaign to do something?
Firstly, I'm a Muslim, and we are taught, about being patient in life. With every hardship comes ease.
Right.
It's within our, holy book, the Quran. With every hardship comes ease, and I had to stay patient for 3 years. When I got my license in 2018, seek the right advice, surrounding myself around, you know, good people. And we overcame the hurdle and created history, you know, with a 3-year battle. It took us 3 years, but I didn't step away. I graduated at Edgehill University in sports studies. So I started coaching fitness and, you know, speaking to my doctors, consultants. Sir Steve Redgrave, he suffered from type 1 diabetes, and he's a 5-time Olympic gold medalist out in the open sea. And I visited his consultant, and he said to me, if Sir Steve Redgrave is out in the open sea, there's no reason for why you shouldn't be competing as a professional boxer. The paramedics are literally 2-3 meters away from you, you know, ringside, and they could be in the ring quicker, you know, helping you. If somebody out in the open sea is suffering, they've got to come down. The paramedics have got to come from the sky, you know, out from a helicopter, and that'll take, you know, quite a lot of minutes. Whereas in the boxing ring, they'll help you within split under a minute.
Now, taking on the authorities, making history, fighting in the way that you did had never been done before. Were you conscious as you were fighting for your own self that you were also making history?
Absolutely. Funny enough, I received a call today, well, a message on Instagram from a fellow type 1 diabetic who's just turning professional. He's from down south, a lad called Jake. And he messaged me asking me what's the rules and regulations. I've got a fight coming up in March, and, you know, to get past the British Board of Boxing Control, passing my medical, have I got to do some extra precautions I've got to overcome? And I gave him some advice, and I've opened the door for thousands of people. I come from a South Asian background, you know, I'm a Pakistani, and it's estimated 1 in 4 Pakistanis have type 1 diabetes, and I've opened doors, you know, for not only in boxing but shown in life that never to give up on achieving your dreams. Do you know, for example, hurdles do come in the way. You've just got to be patient and seek the correct advice and help, and you can achieve your dreams.
We're going to talk after the break about the fight that you're going to have later on this month, but I just wanted to explore that sense of discipline. You know, you have to be like an Olympic sports person. How do you manage that as well as being diabetic?
Discipline, that's massive in boxing. For example, we get up in the morning, you know, pray Fajr, and then I'll have my breakfast, and then I'll be Fajr's sunrise is pretty late on now. Like, for example, in Rochdale currently it's 7:56. Yeah. So that's around breakfast time for me, because I head to the gym. I train at Oliver's gym. I've got one of the best coaches in the world, Humphrey Harrison. He goes far and beyond for me. Like, for example, today he pushed me so hard. He even tells me, you know, go home, you know, thank God, you know, you're training so hard. Like, for example, I'm back home for Zohar time. I'll pray my Zohar, have a nap between Zohar and Asr, and then pray my Asr namaz, eat good foods. Like, for example, it's pretty late for me now. I should be in bed. But after the interview, I'll be heading to bed, you know, praying Isha namaz before sleeping, and, you know, thanking God each and every day, you know, for getting me through, you know, a normal day.
And Louise, I was just going to say, Louise Rothwell was somebody else who was truly inspired by your story. She got in touch with you, and you met her son Ethan at Smallbridge Primary School in Rochdale. You got to hear he manages diabetes as well. Yeah,
I met young Ethan before my last fight, before the pandemic. I invited him to my fight. He came, he enjoyed himself. He's a type 1 warrior. His mother is so inspirational. Ethan is very inspirational with himself. He's, I think he's roughly 9 or 10 years old, and he's putting up a battle. And every day he's you know, he just doesn't suffer from type 1 diabetes. He's got something else as well. Not sure what it is. I've forgotten. It's gone out of my head. But he, like, recently he's just suffered from COVID as well. He puts up a battle, you know, a credit to his mother and father, you know, for bringing him up as such a great lad.
That you kind of won your battle, you got your license, and then COVID hits. How have you coped during the pandemic? Obviously, gyms were closed. How were you training? Yeah. How did you manage that?
Again, patience comes into it. I fought for my license 3 years, and I've had to fight another 2 years. And surely on the 18th of February, I'll reap the rewards, you know, for my patience and staying disciplined. I boxed out of a private gym, so I was allowed to use a gym. We were using the gym, but when it was the strict lockdown that you can't even use your private gyms, you're not allowed out of your houses, except the 1 hour exercise, I was out on the roads running. I was training in my house. My father's got some training equipment at home as well, like a cross trainer, a bike. So we were doing our own circuits at home, family circuits.
Now, family is very important for you. How important have they been to support you in your journey?
Do you know, I class Rochdale as a family. Do you know, the town has got behind me. Like, for example, you're a fellow brother and you've gone out of your way to get me onto your show.
Now, the honour's all mine. I really always wanted to have this conversation, so we never got around to it. So when I found that you were fighting, I thought, right, this is a perfect opportunity to have the conversation.
Yeah. Honestly, thank you so much, Brother Shafiq, for having me on your show. Likewise, the other businesses in Rochdale have got behind me, you know, supporting me. My dad, Zahid, he goes far. Honestly, if it wasn't for my father and my mother, my brother, my sister, you know, if it wasn't for them guys, I wouldn't be boxing today. Because I talk about being patient and they're in the background, you know. For example, when I'm going to have a bad cheap meal, they'd be like, look, you're going to be boxing soon, you know, don't be consuming, you know, such a meal, eat good meals. Because as you know, Brother Shafiq, I suffer from type 1 diabetes. I've got to watch my diet. You know, instead of drinking Coke, I'll be drinking water. And my mother, my father are on top of me every day, you know, guiding me down the right route. And it's very important, you know, parents out there support their children. You know, we've got to have elders looking over the children, telling them from what's right and what's wrong. They've got the experience and, you know, push your children in the right direction. If they do, you know, make a mistake, let them learn from the mistake. Don't let them, you know, don't punish your children. Let them learn from the mistake and put them back on the right path. And, you know, my dad, he's always telling me, you know, what's right, what's wrong. He's 50 odd years old. So he's telling me, you know, guiding me. My mother's doing the same thing. And we're a unit, you know, as a family. And also, you know, Brother Shiri.
Yeah, he was on my show last week. He was my guest last
he's
Wednesday.
An amazing man. You know, our local councillor, he's guiding me, he's supporting me. You know, he's always giving me support. You know, encouraging me. You know, to do better and show the youth of Rochdale. You know, me being a positive role model for the next generation. I'm not here forever, but if I can shed some good light towards our next generation coming through, I'm going to do this. And I've got to have people like you, you know, supporting me. And, you know, the businesses what are supporting me. Without them, I wouldn't be boxing today.
A massive outpouring of support. You mentioned the businesses, all the businesses that are sponsoring you as well. But amongst ordinary Rochdalians who are coming out and saying, yeah, this is our man.
Oh, amazing. Absolutely amazing. We're all a family together. You know, if, for example, Brother Shafiq, you held the protest, was it for Palestine?
Yeah.
In town, the whole town came together. Not just the Asian community, the English community as well. We all get along as a family. And this is why our town's so great. You know, we all get along and support one another. You know, we've got help and support one another. We're out there for each other. That's why it's such a lovely town.
Yeah, it's true. And I didn't pay you to say that. It's a great place and a great community.
Absolutely.
What we're going to do, I know you stay with us, Muhammad Ali. We're going to take a very short break, our final break of the programme. Where does the time go in this programme? We've fascinating conversations today. We'll take that break. We'll come back. We'll talk about the latest fight and the journey to the 18th of February for Muhammad Ali, who's boxing in Bolton. So don't go anywhere. We'll open the lines as well. We'll take some of your calls and questions on 01924 231 083. Join us on the other side of this. Assalamu alaikum, welcome back to Questions, the final segment. Where does the time go? I think it's to do with the fact we've had such fantastic guests tonight. We're still joined by Muhammad Ali, the boxer from Rochdale. He's joining us live on British Muslim TV. We can open the lines and take some of your calls and questions if you want to join the discussion. 01924 231 083. Now, we talked about the pandemic and the uncertainty of not knowing if we were going to go into lockdown, if there was going to be further restrictions, big crowds and stuff like that. How have you kept the momentum going in terms of being disciplined and keep doing your training?
October, a fellow gym mate were boxing on the Amir Khan show in Dubai, and I got to train with Amir. He gave me a lot of advice, and we worked on certain skills, and I was inspired and motivated by him as well. Thinking he's done it at such a young age, and I'm young myself. I can follow in his footsteps. He showed me so much. So I was, in the back of my mind, I was told 5th of February I'll be boxing. But at that time, COVID was, through the roof. People were suffering. And around November time, there was a talk of England going into a lockdown just before Christmas. So back in my mind, I was training very hard in the gym, but I just thought it was 50-50 in my head that I'm going, there's going to be another lockdown. The show's going to be cancelled. Crowds are not going to be allowed to attend. So I stayed motivated, at 70%. I was taking over in the gym. And then before Christmas, I was told, it'll be February time, you'll be boxing 100%. And I just leveled up in the gym, started pushing myself. And it was confirmed towards the end of February that it's not 5th of Feb, it's the 18th, because back in December, boxing was cancelled by the British board and the government in the month of January. There was no boxing taking place in Great Britain. And February's been open, the lid's been lifted. So I can't wait to get in the ring on the 18th of February, showcase my skills, what I've learned over the past 2 years. I'm going to put a devastating performance on. Guys, please attend the fight. If you cannot attend, you can tune in on ESPN Plus or IFL TV, the channel on YouTube. You will see my best performance till this day.
Because you've been training for this moment for the last 2 years.
Yes.
How is it going to feel? Because boxing is about being a boxer, being in the ring, that you'll be finally back in the ring where you belong.
I can't wait to go in there and showcase my skills, what I've been working on. Just don't blink. I'm going to bring the Rochdalian power. I've been drinking a lot of water from Rochdale, and we're bringing some power. Brother Shafiq, yourself, as Rochdalians, once we're in that ring, we are dangerous. And I'm bringing some power, to the ring. Been eating from Knockout Kitchen. They've given me the knockout power.
Uh-huh.
So I'm coming, on the 18th of February. It's going to be a great performance.
Yeah, and in a sense it's in Bolton, so not far from where you are. There's lots of interest locally within communities as well, but there's lots of media interest as well.
Yeah, massively. I've been on your Sky Sports, BBC. I'm going to put a tremendous performance on, and there will be a promoter, knocking on my door, to get me on the big TV networks, inshallah. I just need all your praise. I put a great performance on, and without, your praise and support, I wouldn't be in this position today. You can find me on my social media and, find out how you can get tickets, what channels, if you can't attend in person, what channels to tune in on. So keep an eye and, get following me, give me your support.
Yeah, and the important thing is lots of young people, as I said, really interested in boxing. It's something which lots of people like to watch. What's your advice to young people who might be watching this, who are interested in getting involved in boxing?
Look, do you know, boxing is not just about being physically. I was just talking to somebody at Rochdale Leisure Centre now. Boxing just isn't about, you know, throwing punches, seeing who the tough guy is. First of all, it's a game of chess. You know, it's more mental than being physically prepared. And secondly, you know, the gym, a combat sport, not only boxing, be it karate, wrestling, MMA, it teaches you discipline first and foremost. For example, you've got to be on time to the gym. You know, you've got to be punctual. You've got to be on time to the gym. You don't arrive on time, you get told, you know, to go back home or you get punishment. Secondly, you've got to be disciplined in terms of you've got to be respectful. You know, like your coach, you class him as your father or mother at the time whilst you're in the gym, because you've got to respect them and do as you're told. If you don't, you're in trouble again. Secondly, you know, it's a weight categorized sport, so you've got to eat, you know, correctly. And, you know, boxing is a great, you know, sport to take part in. It teaches you a lot of skills. You've got to be patient. You've got to be respectful. You get taught to wear clean clothes in the gym. You've got to keep you know, on top of your hygiene as well. And, you know, it's a good sport, you know, to get involved in.
You kind of described as Mr. Rochdale because you're not just, you know, focused on your fights and activities that you do in regards to boxing. You're out there visiting schools and communities. How important is that outreach work that you do?
Oh, it's very, very important, you know, passing on my message. I'm not here forever, brother Shafiq. The next generation is going to come through. So if I can advise them, you know, the mistakes I've made, not to repeat them or how to overcome them mistakes, you know, it'll be a great message to pass on to the next generation in schools. For example, like, you know, I've put up a battle, you know, being patient, fighting for my boxing license. Some other people might need advice in another sector of life. And, you know, Shiri, for example, our local councillor, Shiri, he's got me involved in the soup kitchen, you know, giving back to the homeless, you know, giving food back to them. So teaching the next generation, you know, it's not about just ourselves. It's about helping one another in life as well, you know, giving back to your community. Without your community, you're nothing in life.
What does the future hold? What's the next step after this fight?
I want to create history again. Let's get the ball rolling. I want a couple of more fights, and I want to challenge for a belt and create history again, becoming the first diabetic to win a title and create history, win a title for Rochdale. You know, let's shed some light on our town. We've got a lot of positive you know, people in our town. We've got, you know, a lot happening in our town, you know, positivity, but it's never been taken up by the media. We are a fantastic town. You know, if you come look at our Rochdale Town Centre, it's come on leaps and bounds, but our council doesn't get any credit for it. You know, we've come on loads as a town.
Yeah.
You know, it's about time as a town we get, you know, some support, you know, from the media. You know, from the big, you know, people in Parliament, you know, coming visiting our town. It's a beautiful town centre. We've got a great football team. We've got a lot happening in the town. There's a lot to see in this town. I've created history becoming the first diabetic boxer. Come and visit me.
Yeah.
Come and visit Brother Shafiq. He's doing a lot.
If I'm ever there in Rochdale, I live there. Spend a lot of time out of town, but obviously with the pandemic, been spending lots of time more at home. I just wanted to ask you, what do you do to switch off, relax?
I go on holiday. I help out at my brother's takeaway, you know, Knockout Kitchen. He's got his head shop opening soon. So I'm always, you know, giving support to him. I like reading, Brother Shafiq. Do you know about nutrition? I'm one who attends a mosque, you know, on a daily basis. You know, I'm very, you know, faithful. I spend time with my family. I'm a family man. You know, I love spending time with my mother and father. You know, I wouldn't be the man I am today without my mother and father. I love, you know, my mum and dad. I'm always, you know, with them. Any spare time I have, I'm with, you know, my mum and dad.
Yeah, well, it's really a powerful story. Tell us, what's your prediction? I know it's a stupid question, but let's just get it out there.
I feel so. I'm going to knock this kid out. You know, whoever it is, I've trained too hard. You know, anything less, I'm going to put him to sleep.
Yeah. And have you done much research on your opponent?
No, I don't like doing research.
Oh, don't you?
I just like focusing on myself. I love a quick glance. That's about it. But I put the time in. You know, blood, sweat, and tears, injuries. I overcome them. You know, just to get in that ring, perform for 24 minutes on the 18th of February. I've been to hell and back.
What have you learned about yourself during this journey?
I've learned that I'm very, very patient and I'm willing to learn. Do you know, Brother Shafiq? So, for example, when this interview finishes, I'll be picking your head. You'll get fed up by myself. You'll be like, why are you speaking to me? Because I'm going to ask you, how can I make an improvement for the next interview? You know, I must have made some mistakes during this interview today. And I'll be like, how do I present myself in a better manner?
That was a perfect performance. I mean, I would never disagree with you as a boxer.
I'm willing to learn. You know, anything in life, I'm willing to learn, and I'm willing to accept negativity.
I just want to ask you.
I wouldn't say negativity. I'd say someone being critical. Towards me. Yeah. I'm willing to accept that and learn from it. You know, to better myself, and that's only going to make me a better person in life as a human.
Final question to you, Muhammad Ali. Please just tell us how can people support you and get involved and get tickets for this fight? Because it's important to support British Muslims.
You can follow me on my social media, on Facebook, Muhammad Ali, on Twitter, Muhammad Ali Box, on Instagram, Muhammad DK Ali. DK stands for Diabetic Kid, Muhammad DK Ali. And you can just follow me on there, and it's written on there, you know, who you can contact for tickets, what channels the fight's going to come on. So, guys, please remember me in your prayers. Inshallah. And if you can't make it, remember me in your prayers and tune in on television.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, Muhammad Ali. A really fascinating conversation. I'm really glad we did it. And best wishes and success for the fight, inshallah, on the 18th of February. Thank you so much, Brother Shafiq. Please remember me in your du'as. Always. Thank you so much. That was Muhammad Ali, the boxer from Rochdale, now back in the ring for his latest fight. He's fighting on 18th February in Bolton, so it'd be great to support local British Muslims. We'll keep an eye how he gets on. He was joining us live from British Muslim. He was joining us live on British Muslim TV. Anyway, it's the end of the show. I'll see you same time next week. From me and the whole team here at British Muslim TV, thank you so much for joining us. Have a great week. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Good night.